Again, some favorite commentaries from Paul Harvey. This is called The Jerk. It was in the spring of 1922 that the students began complaining about their postal service. The University of Mississippi had its own United States Post Office right there on the campus. The students picked up and posted their own mail at that office. The problem was the postmaster. He was a jerk. Bill did not want the job in the first place. Friends convinced him he needed the job. Pulled some strings for him. Bill took a civil service exam, passed somehow, and became U.S. Postmaster for the University of Mississippi. And one wonders how much of his personal history was recorded on his application. For Bill was a high school dropout, a U.S. Army reject, a college dropout, in that order. It was at Ole Miss that he managed finally to get accepted, but where he failed to complete his freshman year. Now, he was back, age 24, in the non-academic position of campus postmaster. The solemn responsibility of being an employee of the United States government never really dawned on Bill, and he never really appreciated how easy the job was. Another postal employee transported the incoming and outgoing mail between the train station and the post office. That left Bill with sorting the mail and selling stamps, and that was about it. But even that was too much for him. Earliest complaints were that it took Bill too long to begin sorting the incoming mail. And there were often long lines of restless students outside the post office. In even more direct ways, Bill was a public relations failure. His attitude toward post office patrons ranged from indifferent to hostile. And back there, behind the window, he always seemed to be sitting down, frequently engaged in reading a magazine which had been mailed to someone else. And one of the few times he actually spoke, it was to say that he did not intend to beat the beck and call of every expletive deleted who had 2 cents, back in the day now, to buy a stamp. Pretty soon, Bill was spending more and more time away from the post office. According to one reliable source, he used to walk around staring at trees as though studying each leaf. Brooding is what he was doing. Then the final indignity. It wasn't enough that he was slow in fulfilling what duties he had, that he was cold and sometimes even nasty to his patrons, that he neglected even the basic responsibility of staying on the post office premises. Bill, get this now, Bill actually began throwing away the mail. Students and faculty members could often be found rummaging through the post office trash cans in search of personal and official correspondence. It took U.S. postal authorities almost 3 years to get rid of Bill. He was working for the government now, remember that. That he was not ultimately thrown into jail was credited to one government inspector with a sense of humor. You might envision such a young man winding up shoveling coal. And Bill did wind up shoveling coal at a Mississippi power plant. When he failed at that, he did the only thing that was left. He became an author and won the Pulitzer Prize twice. The Mississippi postmaster who threw away the mail was William Faulkner. Now you know the rest of the story. Now this one you might catch easy. Kingdom in a File Drawer. I just love this. Frank's early childhood was a glorious real-life fantasy. His father had been an oil baron and had amassed a fortune. Now Dad was a gentleman farmer, and the family was living in luxury. Their home was a sprawling country estate near Syracuse, New York. An opulent manor surrounded by immaculate gardens and manicured greenery and rolling fields of grain. A splendid property which Frank's mother had christened Roselawn. Now, life at Roselawn was everything a little boy could wish for. Adoring parents, plenty of room to romp and to play. In this way, Frank's youth was unmarred by conventional childhood trauma, until one day. Frank was exploring his father's grain fields, and the boy and his mind were wandering equally happily. And all at once, he was jolted from his daydreams. It was a stranger, someone young Frank had never seen before, a figure towering over him, standing rigid, silent, alone. Frank ran home. For months thereafter, each night, the same nightmare. He would meet the stranger again in his father's field, and in those dread dreams, the stranger would chase him. And then Frank would wake up. It seemed an unfair blemish on the boy's otherwise carefree childhood. He was so happy at Roselawn until bedtime. Then, in slumber, he would walk the open fields once more, only to meet and to be pursued by a nameless, faceless stranger. What happened after the stranger acquired a name and a face is the rest of the story. Now, you might pick up on it quick. There's a timid knock at his study door. His youngsters have brought some neighborhood friends to the house to hear another of Daddy's marvelous stories. With 4 boys of his own now, Daddy has become an adept storyteller. So Daddy reaches into his imagination, into his own childhood, and he begins. For his eager young listeners, Daddy creates a splendid city, a happy place engulfed in green, far from the clutches of care. Daddy remembers Roselawn, where he grew up, and his descriptions are vivid. For the children gathered around him, he breathes life into the faceless stranger of his own youthful nightmares. But now, the stranger is no longer threatening. He is tame and he has a face. One of the youngsters interrupts. What does Daddy call this wonderful kingdom? Daddy stops. He isn't prepared for this. Quickly, his eyes dart about the room for an indication, a clue, something to call his fantasy land. And his eyes come to rest on the file cabinet in the corner. And without thinking, he speaks what he reads on the lowermost file drawer. The name is satisfactory to his young audience. It will remain so forever as it has to this day. And one day, Daddy wrote down the story he told of the carefree metropolis engulfed in green, which he called Emerald City, and of the one sinister stranger he had met in his father's field, which in reality had been nothing more than a scarecrow, and of the marvelous fantasy kingdom spontaneous named after the file drawer. The file drawer below, A through N. You know, O through Z, for this was born to L. Frank Baum, the magnificent tale which he weaves, which with its web of enchantment about the hearts of children still, the wonderful Wizard of Oz. Thank you.